It is pretty close to 7, so I think we'll begin. I know many of you, but not quite everyone, so I think I will have a more formal introduction. I want to say a special thank you to all of you for coming to our presentation tonight. My name is Erica Walker. I'm a member of the Earth Care team here at Montview, and that group was formed in 2018 to seek certification as an Earth Care congregation. Montview was certified in 2019, and this links our efforts to those of almost 300 other Presbyterian churches nationally as we work together to become better stewards of the earth. As we gather tonight, I want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the Cheyenne and Arapaho people, and to honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. Before we begin, I want to say just a couple quick things about being on Zoom. I would ask you to keep yourself muted during Jane's presentation so that the sound quality will be good for everyone. There'll be a part of the evening where we'll either break out into small groups, and then obviously you would not be muted, or we may stay together in a large group and then you can unmute at that point. So there'll be a time where we can converse naturally. And then after the presentation, if you have questions, save them for after. And then at the end of Jane's presentation, then she'll take questions. So tonight is the final night of our speaker series. And if you missed any of the other series, they were all recorded, and the links are available on the This Week at Montview, which comes out on every Thursday. So tonight, it is my great pleasure to introduce Reverend Jane Vennard. The title of her presentation is Our Sacred Relationship with Mother Earth. Reverend Vennard is a retired senior adjunct faculty at the Iliff School of Theology, a spiritual director, retreat leader, author, and longtime friend of Montview. So thank you for coming, Jane. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. I was out this afternoon and realizing as I was admiring the flowering trees that one of the reasons they're so beautiful is we didn't see it last year, because I'm in a retirement center and we were confined to the property. So I couldn't drive through the neighborhoods. I couldn't walk and see the tulips. I mean, it's like I missed a whole year. So it feels wonderful. I'm sorry we aren't together like we had planned for last May, but here we are. So I'd like us to begin with a breath prayer. And what I will do is suggest as we breathe some things you might breathe in and breathe out. So if you would, let's just begin by settling ourselves here, wherever you are, to be as comfortable as possible. And close your eyes if that feels good for you. And just feel your bodies settle in to whatever chair or ground that's holding you. Take a couple of deep belly breaths, expanding our lungs and our bellies as we breathe in. And then allow your breath to return to normal. And as we breathe together now, let's breathe in the Spirit of God and breathe out peace. Breathing in the Spirit of God and breathing out peace. And breathing in the Spirit of God and breathing out justice. breathing in the Spirit of God and breathing out kindness. Breathing in the Spirit of God and breathing out love.
Oh dear. Are you going to listen?
Oh, maybe not.
Breathing in the Spirit of God and breathing out gratitude.
Yes, breathing, breathing, breathing.
And as we fill our own homes with a breath and this community of breath, help us to remember that we can always give the gift of peace, justice, kindness, love, and gratitude. May it be so. Amen.
Jane, I'm going to mute everyone, so you'll have to unmute yourself.
Oh, okay. Okay. I am unmuted, I think. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I've attended your last two sessions. I like to see the sequence of how this unfolds, and it's really been wonderful to be part of the other two. And last week, Amy gave that wonderful presentation on God's relationship with nature. And one of the things that particularly struck me about her presentation was talking about how God's relationship with nature is continuing and is continual. And so often what we think of is that God created the earth, the 7-day story, and then God was done. But she brought out the point that the relationship is always there, always continuing, and of interest, I think, for all of us to remember as we look at our sacred relationship with Mother Earth. And so this evening, I'm going to be focusing on that relationship to nature. I'm going to use nature rather than Mother Earth because I think there's more than it's just nature. For me, brings it a little closer to home. Mother Earth seems so big, I can hardly get a hold of it. And so what we'll do is I'll present some material that I've gathered from a number of places in my own experience, and then we'll do a guided imagery. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that when we come to that. And then we'll either go into some smaller groups for sharing, or we might stay in the whole group. So we'll see how that goes. In the description, one of the people that I said I was going to draw on was Martin Buber. And if you remember, Martin Buber was a German at the beginning of the 20th century. And what made him so famous, I think, for many of us and have heard about, is his wisdom of I, thou in relationship. And he used that term, I, thou. That book was written in Germany and published in 1923. And it wasn't until 1937 that it was published in English. And it's how we view relationships. It's all about our way of being in relationship, not just with one another, although that's his focus, but also with nature and with other people and the wider world. And the first thing he talks about is that much of our relationship in our world and our culture is I-it relationship. So a relationship with another person or with a tree or with the world is I-it. I'm the subject and it is the object. And now, as you can see from both grammar and your own experience, if I am the subject and the other is an object, I am able to name that, whatever it is, an it and an object, and not have the respect I might have for something that is living. It describes the other people, animals, and growing things as an object. Whereas when we move to I, thou, what we have is a relational experience and it's subject to subject relationship. Subject to subject. And when we move from I, it, and we'll never move totally away from that, that's the way our culture operates. But as we look at the possibility of moving to I, thou, we have another possibility. When I talk to you and I see you as subjects, not as objects on my screen, but I see you as your own subject, and our relationship is more equal rather than hierarchical. And one of the things I realized as I was preparing this, that in my long history of teaching, that I have always tried to teach with an I, thou perspective. And I'd never named it that way till I went back for this program to look at Martin Buber's work. That when I, as a teacher, if I'm the subject and my students are all objects, it separates us. But if I remember, whether it's a 5th grade classroom or a graduate school program, that the people out there are to be respected and cared for and treated with kindness, because they too are a subject in their own world. And I realized that that's quite exciting to me. And I realized that when things get bad when I'm teaching, meaning disorganized, or I lose my place, or I lose my energy, or something like that, then I often move to I, it. I'm here and you're out there as an it. When it's I, thou, things begin to flow differently. And so I found that in my own experience, and would invite you to think about that in relationship to whatever work it is that you do. Now, some examples of this that I have found is with strangers, whether an individual person or whether it's a group. And if I meet the stranger or the strangers as I, it, one of the things that is promoted is judgment. If I see the object as an it, I'm more quick to judge. That's my first response. I don't know this person, and then I begin to judge. I don't know this neighborhood, I begin to judge. And what I found is that one of the ways to begin to shift toward I, thou is to substitute judgment with curiosity. Because with curiosity, we become a learner, and then we're both subjects. The person I'm learning from is also a teacher, and I'm a teacher, and we move more into the I, thou experience. Another place that I've noticed this, again with people, is in families. And I think we all have examples. My example is I had a very odd great aunt Emily, who was in my life much of my teenage years. And I just couldn't relate to her. She was the oddest person, and yet she was family and she had Sunday meals with us. And I wish I could have tried a little bit differently to be in relationship. I think I missed something by keeping her separate, because she was so unfamiliar and so odd is the only word I can say for it. And so as we think of in terms of that, hopefully we don't all have that kind of I-it relationships in our families. But I think that when we're looking at siblings and children and other relatives, that we can look at our children and look at our siblings as other subjects, I'm not a subject looking at you, to my sister or to my stepsons, but rather I remember as we relate that that person is also a subject, and I'm curious. It opens me up to that possibility. And what I've also found is that when with children, and with more with my 5th grade students years and years ago than graduate students, I would lecture. And with my children, this is what you're supposed to do. And that is an I-it relationship. But with children and other people, if we have a respectful conversation and begin to move in that, then we're getting into an I-thou relationship. And I'm sure you've experienced that sometimes, where all of a sudden you realize that the relationship is shifting, and often it's shifting because you've become more of a conversationalist than a lecturer. Another place, I think, that we find I-thou relationships is with family pets. Most people that I know who have a pet that they adore, that it's a sense of, this animal is so special to me. It is not an it. It's a person, it's a living creature to be created or to be conversed with in love. There's a difference. And I have seen people with their pets who see their animal as an it. And though that's what can lead to pet abuse. But if we have a dog, I'm a dog, but I know a lot of people who are cats, there's something about their unconditional love that reminds me that that animal is a thou. And I'm a subject and it's a subject as well. And then there are the animals and the creatures in the wild. And I remember a definite time of coming around a corner in Estes Park, and there was a huge buck, and it was looking at me and I was looking at it. And it was extraordinary. It was like I could see the eyes. I was that close. And the way it looked at me and the way I looked at it, it was a real relationship. It wasn't me and that animal. It was an I-thou relationship. And I think that we can move toward that with all kinds of creatures. I read a wonderful memoir from a woman whose name I can't remember, but she was talking about meeting her husband-to-be. And when she went for a walk with him the first time, she said, one of the things that made me fall in love with his, he talked to the squirrels and even named them. So here was a man walking in the wilderness, talking to the squirrels. Now I have a friend named Margaret who talks to the plants. Walking with her in a neighborhood is extraordinary because she'll stop, like especially the blossoms, and if she can reach it, she'll look and she'll say, oh, you are so beautiful. Thank you for bringing this beauty to me. Oh, and then she'll go on. It takes a long time to cover a block, let me tell you, but she is just so convinced and so living that life that these plants are a thou for her. It's not me and the tree, it's me and these blossoms who are there to treat with gratitude. And gratitude is one of the things, along with curiosity, that helps us move away from I, it to I, thou. And I would encourage us, particularly as we are out this summer, when we find water, to thank the water. Gratitude is a wonderful way of turning a relationship into a respectful and a sacred relationship. And I love the fact that in Celtic Christianity, they suggest to think about, and this is great here in Colorado, when you look at a mountain, just know that the mountain is looking back at you. See what happens? It's not I'm the subject, it's the object, but oh, maybe that mountain is looking back at me. Now, this is not real scientific information, but as we change our hearts from an I-thou into an I-thou position, it begins to open our hearts. That an I-thou relationship really is one where it's a change of heart. It's a change of heart. And as we move in that direction, and I do think that in our world, when we have so much concern and so much, and that question that we always have is, what can I do? One of the things we can do is we can change our hearts. And if you're going to treat water as an object rather than something that we're grateful for, we'll make different kinds of decisions. And so I'm really about the fact that a lot of the work in the world that we do is basically a change of heart. And so I-thou relationship really generates a sense of respect and gratitude and a reciprocity where duties and gifts are two sides of the same coin. And this is at the root of Indigenous culture's approach to Mother Earth, that there are duties and gifts, two sides to the same coin. This idea became more explicit and more firm in reading a wonderful book, and I'll show it to you here, by Robin Kimmerman, Braiding Sweetgrass. You can see that. She is a wonderful woman, and she writes about this gifts and two sides of the same coin. Eagles were given the gift of farsight, so it is their duty to watch over us. Rain fulfills its duty as it falls because it was given the gift of sustaining life. What is the duty of humans? If gifts and responsibilities are one, then asking what is our responsibility is the same as asking what is our gift. It is said that only humans have capacity for gratitude, and this gratitude is among our gifts. Duty and responsibility and gifts. Now, Robin Kimmerman is a mother, a scientist, a professor of botany, and an enrolled member of the Potawatomi Nation. And I would also say that she is a great storyteller. Her book is filled with stories of her own upbringing and her movement in life from her Indigenous background into the world of science, where she became, she graduated from college and master's and a PhD and working in the science field. And at the same time, always bringing with her, or if she forgot, would remind herself to bring back her Indigenous wisdom. Her story that she tells about going to graduate school, or first off, just going to college, was that she wanted to be a botanist. That was her goal. And as a child, she collected things. Her room was filled with boxes of plants and different things and looking for things. She said she always was out there kind of looking at the ground, because that's where these grasses were and all the things that she was wondering about. She always looked for new species and new variations, and just that constant wondering about what she saw. And one of the things she says is that her greatest fascination was why the goldenrod and deep purple asters always grew together in October on a nearby hill, making a stunning scene. She wanted to know why these plants that made this beauty, why they did that. Why did they grow together? It was very unusual to find either the goldenrod or the asters separate from each other. So this was kind of her burning sense as she went off to college. And of course, you go to college and somebody in the department says, well, why do you want to be a botanist? And she said, I want to find out why goldenrod and asper, deep purple asper, always live together and grow together because they're so beautiful. And he says, that's not science. And then suggested that she major in art and where she could find beauty in art. It did not belong in science, he told her. He was separating science and beauty. She pursued in her studies. And what she found was these two questions, an I-it in relationship to plants and science. The question is, what is it? Or how does it work? So the idea is you go out and you get specimens and you bring them in. What is it? What's a species? All of that, Latin names, and how does it work? But thou, according to Robin Kimmerman, is when plants are seen and experienced as teachers and companions. The questions that you might ask the plants from this position is, who are you and what can you teach us? Who are you and what can you teach us? And she realized that these are two ways of knowing. it's a both and situation. I mean, she went on for her PhD, and you can imagine how much science she had to do to get there, but she never gave up the idea that that our plants, our wildlife can be teachers and companions. And we see the world more fully when we use both. So her calling, and this is a wonderful, as I said, she's a wonderful storyteller. And I would recommend for that sense of how the Indigenous peoples in their own different ways, and as she said, no matter what the tribe or the nation, gratitude is really of the most importance in all of our understanding. The other place that I thought was important for us to look at was a book called Ecowomanism by Melanie Harris. And Ecowomanism is about ecology. And the word womanism comes from the understanding of the womanist way of life, the womanist view, womanism. And that term grew out of Black, Indigenous, colored people of color who experienced racism in the feminist movement. And if we go back in history of the feminist movement, that was true. And so the same as it was in the suffragettes, that there was some racism there. So they decided not to take the name of feminists, but of womanist. And together, feminists and the womanists could really do a lot, but they were standing up against the racism they had experienced. And this book that Melanie Harris wrote, and I think she may have spoken at Montview at some time. She was here at Iliff. Her book is called Ecowomanism, African, American, and Earth-Honored Faiths. It's a fairly academic book. It's not nearly as fun to read as Reverend Kimmerman. So if you want to make a choice between them, I would recommend this. But I think it's important because she writes about the interconnectedness of the Earth community and that we're called to partner with the Earth. And this partnership leads humans to recognize the innate beauty and goodness of the self and all beings. In her introduction to the book, she traces her eco-ethics back to her grandparents who left Mississippi during the Great Migration and brought with them the importance of cherishing the earth. And she writes, "We are to cherish the earth as part of one's religious duty and to honor the earth through one's spiritual life. We are to cherish the earth as part of one's religious duty and to honor the earth through one's spiritual life." And as I looked at that, those words that she's using are all part of the I-thou experience, interconnected, partner, cherishing, honoring. Those are the words that come with an I-thou relationship. So with those three wise people guiding us in this, I'd like us to focus a little bit on one part of the earth. As I said, we talk about the earth and then we talk about nature. And then if we narrow it down a little bit, we can be, I think, more out of our heads and into our hearts. And that for me, one of the places that I like doing this and have found so many resources, and you probably have as well, is to focus on trees. So much has been written about trees these days, about the gifts they give and the way they communicate and all the different ways that trees gift us and we can gift them. There's in Japan now, there's a growing understanding and it's become quite a business to go forest bathing. And to go forest bathing, you don't put on your bathing suit. You go into the forest and you just sit. You just sit in the beauty of that. And one of the places where I found this so wonderful is from Howard Thurman, the wonderful African-American theologian. And he writes in his autobiography or his memoir about his self as a child and a tree. When the storms blew, the branches of the large oak tree in our backyard would snap and fall. But the topmost branches of the oak tree would sway, giving way just enough to save themselves. I needed the strength of that tree, and like it, I wanted to hold my ground. Eventually, I discovered that the oak tree and I had a unique relationship. I could reach down in the quiet places of my spirit, take out my bruises and my joys, unfold them and talk about them. I could sit, my back against its trunk, and talk aloud to the oak tree and know I was understood. Somebody did say to me once, if you want to know how to be still, just sit down by a tree. There's the tree as teacher, the tree as I and thou. And the wonderful thing that I read later about Howard Thurman is this was not just childhood. Every time he went back to his family home, he went to that tree and spent hours leaning up against that tree. So it wasn't just the fantasy of childhood, it was something that really touched him in a way that he brought it into his life as an adult. And so I'd like us, from this information and these gifts from our writers, to do a guided imagery. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with guided imagery, but let me tell you just a little bit about the way I do it. I'm going to invite you to use your imagination, and I will guide you into some ideas that your imagination can follow. Like you were able to, if you wanted to, take my ideas about breathing in and breathing out. It'll be a similar kind of suggestion. What I've found over time is it doesn't matter how fast or slow I go, it's wrong for somebody. So if I go too slowly for you, just allow it and see what happens. And if I'm going fast, just stay with where you need to be. There's no way that you can do it right or wrong. It's the opportunity to begin to open our hearts in a different way to the sacredness of creation. I had a woman one time in a class I was teaching, and she said, I just don't do guided imagery. I just can't do it. I said, well, just wait and see. And I was doing something about animals. And when we stopped the imagery, she said, well, I told you I couldn't do it. I didn't see an animal at all. And I said to her, well, if you had seen an animal, what would it have been? She said, oh, a bird. And I said, well, what color would it be? Oh, it was multicolored and it was big. And there she was. Somehow she thought that if she closed her eyes, she was supposed to see something, but it was all in her imagination. So if you don't see things, you might get words or ideas and don't think, oh, that's not guided imagery. It really can be for all of us. So give yourself the opportunity to give this a try. And what we will do when we're finished, I'll give you a few moments just to reflect, and then we'll go into breakout groups. So I think 4 in a group, Erica, would work, 3 groups of 4. And I would suggest, because if we were together and you were going to go to breakout rooms, what would you do? You'd stand up and go someplace. One of the things I've found on Zoom is we don't move enough. So as you go to your breakup room, just stand and stretch, move around a little bit before you press that button that says join room 2, okay? So get your body involved in this, all right? So you willing to give this a try? Since you can't say yes, nod, or you don't have to, you can just close your eyes and you can do anything you want. I found that quite readily in all my years of teaching. And probably what you do is what you need to do, not what I say, right? So we'll start, as I did earlier, with a little bit of settling where we are. So again, follow your breathing. And as we breathe, turn your attention to your bodies this evening. Just notice. Are they lively? Are they tired? Are they hungry? Just notice what's going in your body. Don't try to change it. Just notice. Then turn your attention to your feelings. Just notice what you're feeling, what you've been feeling since we started, or maybe some feelings you brought in from your day. Don't try to change them, just notice them. Then turn your attention to your thoughts. Just notice, don't judge. Just notice how your mind is working this evening and what thoughts are going on. And then allow yourself, if possible, to let those body feelings and your feelings, your emotions, and your thoughts all just slide to the periphery of your mind and heart. So you see an open space, a space that's not cluttered. And in the distance, you see a tree. It could be a tree that you're familiar with outside your house, could be a tree that you knew as a child, or it could be a tree of your imagination. Just let that rise into your attention and see that tree in the distance. And then I would invite you to slowly walk toward it. Take your time, noticing how the tree changes in your perception as you get closer to it. And as you get close, begin to explore it with all your senses. Noticing what it looks like as you move toward it. When you get close to it, touch it and see how it feels. Get close enough to smell it if it's not obvious, even at a distance. And imagine what it might taste like. And then notice any sounds that go with this tree. Do you hear the breeze in the leaves? Do you hear creak of its branches? And after you've explored it this way, see if you realize that this tree is becoming a thou. Your relationship is deepening and you're respecting it. And if you're willing, let yourself sit beside it, lean against it, and just feel the stillness of that tree. What does it feel like to share that stillness with your tree? And then notice if you have anything you would like to tell your tree. Something about your day, something about a concern. What might you tell this tree, knowing that you will be understood? And notice as you sit there, how your relationship with the tree may have changed as you grew closer, got curious, spoke to it, and loved it. And how your I-it relationship was transformed to I-thou, you the subject and the tree the subject as well. So take a moment now to feel your feet on the ground, your surroundings. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. So the invitation for the breakout rooms, we'll only be in them about just about 7 or 8 minutes. The purpose of it is to share with one another, not to ask questions so much, but share. What was that like? What was your tree like? What did you experience as you moved toward it, explored it, sat with it, talked with it? Just to share that experience. You don't have to share. You can just be in the group and not say anything. Whatever works right for you. So let's move into those groups. And Erica, can you give them a 10-minute or a 5-minute, no, a 1-minute warning, probably with just 7 of us, a 1-minute warning. Okay, so please enjoy your sharing and do with it what you will. And we have about not quite 10 minutes to just look at and ask any questions. And I don't like to call it Q&A because I don't think I have any answers, but I can respond. So I like Q and R. And I have a friend who does Q and O because she said, all I do is give opinions. So, so there may be answers, there may be responses, there may be opinions. So I'd like to open it up to any of your thoughts or feelings about tonight or the whole series that you'd like to share with Erica.
Yeah. We can't hear you, Don. Okay, he's gonna come. This is my husband, Don, so he's got a question.
Okay. Oh.
By the way, I really enjoyed your talk, Jan. And one of the things that I thought of when you're talking about I and it, and then I and thou, is actually I and we. That's sort of the next progression of things, I would say. But anyway, that's just a thought that came to me.
That's wonderful. Away from our individualism to our collective. And right. So to explore what we and thou, if a whole culture could treat the rest of the world as thou, how wonderful that could be. Thank you for that. I hadn't thought about that at all.
Yeah, so thank you. So.
Yeah.
Go back into my window.
Anybody else? I was thinking about the tree, and I was thinking, well, maybe if you didn't do it in your imagery, you don't want to talk, that it would be, just to think about when you go by a tree, to just go up and feel it and see what it's like and kind of make that connection. And when I was teaching 5th grade years and years and years ago, I asked my students to go outside and hug a tree. There are a lot of trees in the property. And then I found out that my principal got some calls from neighbors about what were all those kids doing out of class, hugging their trees. So I learned after that when I wanted to do something like that, I should tell the principal first, because he was kind of blindsided. He didn't know the kids were out there. But anyway, it is something children love to do. And I know that some children have that sense of wonder with a tree, particularly trees they can climb.
Mhm.
And maybe if you remember in your own life of climbing trees.
Mhm. Jane, I have a question. I appreciate what you were saying about how, as we're faced with the environmental challenges, the first question that comes to many of us is, what can I do? And you were saying that one important thing we can do is to have a change of heart. And we can do that by cultivating gratitude and curiosity. And my question is, I guess I have two questions. One is, do you have anything else you could say about how to do that? And then, is there any way to help other people do that as well?
Yeah. Well, I think we teach by example. So mostly from that, how the language we use. But I'm thinking of Melanie Harris's quote that I read to you about religion, where she says, we are to cherish the earth as part of one's religious duty and to honor the earth through one's spiritual life. So I think the change of heart, we know in spiritual formation that it's a lot about change of heart. So a discipline of spiritual practices is really, and it's really, I think, honoring Melanie's call to that as a religious and spiritual community, that's one of the things we can foster. And I think just to keep our eyes and our hearts open, not only to the world, but to the strangers within the world, that same sense of being willing to be curious and grateful, that those really are the things. And I think we model that a lot to people. Yeah. So let me just close. I want to close with a poem that I just love. It's from Mary Oliver, who is a poet who honors and cherishes the world in everything that she writes. But this one takes it not just talking to the tree, but the trees talking to her. The title is When I Am Among the Trees. When I am among the trees, especially the willows and the honey locust, equally the beech, the oaks, and the pines, they give off such hints of gladness. I would say that they save me, and daily. I am so distant from the hope of myself in which I have goodness and discernment and never hurry through the world, but walk slowly and bow often. Around me, the trees stir in their leaves and they call out, stay a while. The light flows from their branches and they call again. It's simple, they say. And you too have come into the world to do this, to go easy, to be filled with light, and to shine. May it be so. So thank you for inviting me and for your attention. Thank you, Erica.
We can clap. We're all unmuted, so we can clap.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
You're most welcome.
Thank you so much, Jane. This was great.
Good.
Any last questions or comments in a couple minutes before we wrap up? All right. Well, thanks to everyone for coming, and special thanks to you, Jane.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
All right. Good night.